everyone for joining us tonight. Oh, someone. I'm Jennifer McRorie. I'm the Director Curator at the Moose Jaw Museum and Art Gallery, and I'm very pleased to have with us tonight Diana Thorneycroft, a Winnipeg artist who is currently showing her installation series Heard here at our gallery. And Diana is going to do a presentation on the body of work and how it relates to other bodies of work that she's been working on the last while. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the Moose Jaw Museum and Art Gallery is situated on what is known as Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, on Treaty 4 territory, the traditional lands of the Blackfoot, Cree, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Nakota, Dakota, Lakota, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect and honor the treaties that were made on all territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we're committed to move forward in partnership and reconciliation and collaboration with Indigenous nations. I'd like to acknowledge our funders for their support. They are the City of Moose Jaw, Sask Arts, Canada Council for the Arts, Sask Culture, Saskatchewan Lotteries, Canadian Heritage, and the Government of Canada. As I mentioned, Diana will be presenting on her work, and then we'll open up for discussion with questions and comments. So please feel free to unmute yourself or add comments in the chat bar. So to start off, I'll introduce Diana Thorneycroft. Diana Thorneycroft is a Winnipeg artist who's exhibited various bodies of work across Canada, the United States, and Europe, as well as in Moscow, Tokyo, and Sydney. She's a recipient of numerous awards, including Assistance to Visual Arts Long-Term Grant from Canada Council, several senior art grants from the Manitoba Arts Councils, and a Fleck Fellowship from the Banff Centre for the Arts. Her work has been the subject of national radio documentaries and a CBC national documentary for television. Her photo-based exhibition, The Body, Its Lesson, and Camouflage was on an 8-city tour from 2000 to 2002, and a book of this same name was published. Her work has been included in the 2002 released Fade and Press publication Blink, which presents the work of 100 rising stars in photography. They've been selected by 10 world-class curators, each proposing 10 photographers who they consider to have emerged and broken new ground in the last 5 years. Canadian Art Magazine also selected her recent body of work, Group of 7 Awkward Moments, as one of the top 10 exhibitions of the year in 2008. And so here's Diana.
Thanks, Jennifer. It sounds like I haven't done anything since 2008.
Oh, no.
No. It was fortuitous that the exhibition should be in Moose Jaw. It turned out it was quite interesting. I currently have an exhibition on at Slate Gallery with Gina Fafard. The title is called Carnival of Tails, Tongues, and Other Protrusions. And it's a mixture of some of the sculptural objects that you'll see in my talk and new drawings. And it was Gina who said, because Gina wanted to show the Heard. And I said, I think your gallery is a little bit too small. She said, oh, well, just try Moose Jaw. And I thought, oh, okay. So I tried Jen and Moose Jaw, and just happened to be an opening. It was like, holy shit, who would have thought? So it was really fortuitous, and I really appreciate this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the exhibition that's specifically in the gallery, the concepts that led up to it, but also Heard was the initial body of work, and I ended up doing 2 more, and ultimately there was a touring installation called Black Forest, and then in brackets Dark Waters, and it composed of the herd of horses, 18 photographs, and then another installation called The Village. Now conceptually, Black Forest is about the grotesque, and I've been interested in the grotesque for a long time. And I'll just, this is maybe a bit academic, but I think just to situate it, grotesques are by their nature intermixed, unresolved, and impure, and to represent them as fixed entities misses their most salient feature. So, and Francis Connolly is a well-known writer who's written a lot about this, about the grotesque. And when you see something, and it's a common phrase, ew, that's so gross. That's kind of exactly what the grotesque are. It's, to Connolly, grotesque works, because they break boundaries. It is a figure of hybridity and flux, questioning established conventions and challenges the relationship between individuals and their surroundings. So often things that are gross are leaking or spewing or dripping or smelling. So there really is a lot of body disgust involved, but it's of course more complex than that. I'm also interested in the uncanny. It's a Freudian term which describes an instance where something is simultaneously familiar and foreign, resulting in a feeling of discomfort. And I'll never forget someone describing this to me. She said, have you ever heated up milk and you're sipping the hot milk and suddenly there's a skin that's on top of that? So it's kind of grotesque. It's also uncanny because you know it's just milk, but it could be like it's scab-like. So there's this vacillation between disgust and understanding and an acceptance of that you have experienced this before. So I've been interested in unusual things for a long time. This is a drawing I did, God, I think it was before 90% of you were born. The title is It Was Good for Me, Was It Good for You? So this is a good example of the uncanny because you're used to seeing Canada grade A chickens, but not in post-coital positions. Here's another one called Suddenly Last Summer. And these are color pencil crayon drawings on paper, obviously. I also did a series in 2005 called the Doll series. And this was, a lot of people think that I've altered the dolls, but in fact I didn't. I photographed them just as I found them, and it speaks to the culture of toys that are made for little girls. This one is called Pout, but a lot of the dolls were they had tongues and obviously tongues, but luscious lips. And they're really, when you isolate the tongue and the mouth away from the eyes, they are incredibly sexual. And that was my intent. So there's the feeling of the grotesque, but also the uncanny. Yeah, this doll looks like a blow-up doll, but it's a little doll made for a little 2 to 3 year old girl. Yeah, this one, it's called Yawn. It's a doll that's yawning, but we know what that looks like. So I just want to talk about some of the herd influences. Many years ago, my husband and I went to China, and while we were there, we witnessed disabled bodies that were spectacular. I didn't photograph them when I was there, and I ended up taking these off the internet. We went to a part of a village in China that we noticed these people with disabilities trying to make money, like as is this young woman here. This is a photograph from India, but and this little boy, I mean, you can just see his legs are tied around his back. One of the most spectacular bodies that I saw, it was a woman whose, her mouth was down by her chin. I remember that. And she wasn't a burn victim, but she looked like a burn victim. She didn't have a nose, she didn't have the cartilage, she just had 2 holes. Her body was completely distorted and her arms were all wrapped and I remember thinking, oh, I want to photograph her. Wait a minute, I can't photograph her. That's exploiting her. But wait a minute, she's here to be exploited. Wait, I can't do this. Like it was, the feelings I had were so complex. And I remember I went and I put money in her bucket and I tried to make eye contact with her, but she wouldn't look up. And when I got back to Winnipeg, I couldn't forget the experience of looking at these people. And it began a year-long research into understanding my feelings. I read A Fine Balance, which is about the spectacle of the disabled body in India. Slumdog Millionaire addresses many of the issues. I realized that the whole idea of bodies being used to garner an income is not new, nor are altered bodies new. This is a famous painting by Bruegel from 1559, and here's a detail of some of the beggars in the village. Many years ago, I was introduced to this artist named Joel Peter Witkin, and he's actually the reason I started doing photography in the late 1980s, early 1990s. And what he does is he actually he places ads in newspapers and asks for people who are different to come and pose for him. He doesn't pay them, but they do get a print. And nowadays these prints are, I mean, it's quite a substantial payment. But his intent is to honor them and to do the opposite of belittling. I also started reading about freak shows and circuses, and I realized that my interest in this woman in China was not, and I'm going to be honest and critical of myself, it was not unlike the desire a lot of people used to have when they would go to freak shows at circuses. And I wondered what that is about. And is it about, I mean, as a visual artist, I've always been interested in things that were different, but was it also a way of me being thankful that as an able-bodied person, I could look at a disabled body and appreciate my ability. Like it's the feelings are so complex. And I really tried to understand. Of course, historically, back when circuses were common, a lot of these different people had agency. They actually made a living because they were spectacle. The famous Eng and Chang bunker, these are the Siamese twins, the Chappelle twins, Reba and Lori. And here's a photograph. It's interesting. Reba changed her name to George, and he became a country western singer, but his sister still had to pay to see her concerts. And I just love that humor. I just love that humor. Abigail and Brittany Hensel. This photograph is from many years ago, and they've been on, well, Oprah Winfrey more than once. Here I have it twice, but I'm sure that they're on quite a bit. And they are one of the longest surviving conjoined twins. And here is a parasitic twin is also something that often happens, and I'll show you examples of animals, but this is where one of the twin dies before it can be developed further and becomes part of the living twin's body. So that aside, now I'm going to make a bit of a leap. This is my studio. I have a fantastic space in the Exchange District here in Winnipeg. Jennifer mentioned my earlier series group of 7 awkward moments. I use a lot of things in the studio, so I had to have shelves and organize myself. This is me photographing a work of art, and I'll be showing you photographs later on. But the process is that I turn the lights, you can see the room that I'm in, it has a door. I shut the lights off, I lock the shutter open, and I illuminate the set with a flashlight. And that's why my photographs have this kind of ethereal, dreamlike quality. My sets, it takes me a long time to construct a set. And I'm showing you this partially because this is a ramp, and it became, I did the ramp of Herd first, that's currently exhibit in the Moose Jaw Gallery, and this came second. And I had to make this miniature ramp, and the whole idea of a ramp in a forest, I wanted to have graffiti on it. So this is when Trump just had been elected. So I wrote "fuck Trump" so many times, over and over and over, because I was just disgusted. And it just kind of added, there's a lot of other things, but I just wanted to share that with you. So this is the set, and I haven't added the snow in this one yet, but just wanted you to see the process. So here we go, herd. I don't know how many have seen the installation. When I first started working, it was actually a conversation that took place with myself and my two studio mates, Aganitha Dick, who is well known in Saskatchewan, and Reva Stone. I started collecting these horses, thinking I would eventually use them in my work, but Aganitha suggested that we each alter a horse. Reva, who is a computer robotic whiz, hated the idea and ended up abandoning it. Aganitha and I both did a horse, and this is the first horse that I did. And I loved doing it so much, I thought, hey, I should do a second. And then I did a third, and then I did a fourth. And by the time I was finished, I had done about 160. Sorry, that's not right. About 80 horses. There's about 160 in the exhibition, about 80 horses. I knew right from the beginning that I wanted the horse's, front part of the horse's face to be cut off so I could construct a mouth and a tongue. And I've been interested in mouths and tongues for a long time. In my early black and white work and in some of my Group of 7 awkward moments, but more so recently. And if you see the drawings at Gina's at Slate Gallery, there are a lot of drawings with tongues. And someone, there's a famous quote that regarding to do with the mouth, that the mouth is where the dry inside meets, the dry outside meets the wet inside. And I really like that it's like this liminal space. It also is, tongues are used we use tongues for language, to eat, to make love, to converse, to swallow, but mouths can also be violated and penetrated. So it's always been a fascinating sight for me. So I'm just going to show you some of the first few horses. I was using Sculpey, which bakes at 275 degrees. But at one point, I put it in the oven and the plastic melted, which was not good. But what happened after the plastic melted, it really warped the limbs. And I realized that this really altered body related more to the woman that I'd seen in China. And I've got that coming up in a minute. This one is called midges. Partially on one side of the body, I drew those little irritating bugs, and the other part, I glued them. So this is the first one that really melted in the oven. And I remember taking it to the studio, and Aganitha said, "Oh, Diana, you've had a breakthrough." And I needed her to say that, because what happened was the Sculpey broke into pieces, and I had to glue it back together again. But once I did, I realized that it was that hugely, profoundly altered horse shape that finally disappeared and became another entity and really kind of represents the other. This one I put into our barbecue. I should tell you that I ended up covering things in tinfoil because melting plastic is not good, or breathing in melted plastic is not good for your health. This one is a very special one. I call it Larry. I had a 21-year-old cat who died of cancer when I was doing this. And so the little dots represent his cancer. And before he died, he was dying and his tongue kind of fell out. And one of the claws on the hoof is one of Larry's. This one, he had, and this is where I'm going to introduce the grotesque. Larry had a skin condition, and the vets suggested that I just, kind of rub it, and the scabs would fall off. So a lot of the scabs I glued them onto this horse. But that also stems from flowers and fake doll hair and porcupine quills. It's interesting. This has happened before where I've done a piece and I think, oh God, that looks familiar. And I realized after doing this that it was Picasso's Guernica that had influenced me. This is the horse. And when I flipped it up like this, it really reminded me of Picasso's Guernica, where that horse is screaming and the pain and agony and the violence of that war came through. This one, I ended up gluing rubber slugs that fishermen use to catch fish. I glued that to the belly of this and then put a skin of sculpey over it. And where the sculpey was kind of thin, some of the rubber has erupted and spilled through. And that's another element of the grotesque. So I'm showing you a couple photographs of conjoined animals. It's two pigs, well, one pig, two heads. And this is my response to that. And this is a calf with a parasitic twin. This is one side of the horse. And then this is, you can see the parasitic twins' legs dangling. This one is called Sitting Horse. And the more I did, the more I was able to push and add various materials. This one has a tongue with aphids on it. And they were bright red when I picked them, and then they just turned black, which kind of surprised me after they died. But this is the installation at the Nickel. Oh, no, sorry, this is the installation in Montreal. And I think I have an example of the Nickel. The Nickel was the second last gallery it showed at. And because they painted the walls black, it really was a stunning installation. So after I finished the horses, I decided I wanted to show them on a ramp. And my husband and several other friends, I paid them to build a 40-foot ramp. And the idea is that through the body's ability or disability, the notion of showing them moving forward and moving upward is about optimism and hope. I also included normal, and this is in quotation marks, unaltered horses. The horses I bought, they're Breyer horses or Mattel horses, and I would buy them through eBay or at junk stores. And I wanted to include some unaltered horses with the altered horses that in some ways includes mental disabilities. For example, I've been on antidepressants since I was, I think I was around 32. And so no one looks at me and thinks, oh, you're disabled. But if I were to stop taking that medication, I certainly would be disabled. So I wanted to include able-bodied or seemingly able-bodied horses, along with the ones that have these extraordinary and spectacular physical alterations. And not all of them are about harm or negativity associated with disability, which thank God that whole notion is changing. Some of them are just spectacular, just in difference. Some of them have horns and scales and claws and various other parts. There's the horse with the aphids. Like this one with the double skull. It's more monstrous than anything. And a lot of them are part human and part horse. And that certainly continued after I finished this. In fact, when I was doing this, I started altering some figurative pieces, and that led to the photographs and the third part. Those are the mosquitoes and midges. And then at the end of the ramp, the horses are leaping into the wall, which to me, it's about believing in the ability to move forward and the power of magic and permission and going places that you've never gone before, but you still, and there's the cliche leap of faith, but that's sort of what I intended with this. So I just want to read this quote. As the grotesque represents the opposite of corporeal perfection, clean, well-defined, and symmetrical, the severity of the deviations have been made explicit because they are shown alongside plastic toy horses that have not been altered. The transformed objects therefore present an alternative that transgresses boundaries and the concepts of the culturally normative. Standing as a stark contrast to the iconic representation of the horse as an animal of great power and beauty, the transformed horses and herd epitomize the grotesque. They are damaged, abject, vulnerable, and at risk, and as such are marked as a threat to the norm and thus endangered. The potency of these altered horses is not the usual story of rampant strength, but rather fragility, particularly for those that are different, asymmetrical, and augmented. So I'm just going to show you now. So Black Forest is, my dad was in the Canadian military and we lived in the Black Forest when I was a kid. This is the military base called Four Wing. And I have a little bit more text to read. The Black Forest is the area in Germany where many of the folklore stories the Brother Grimms wrote about originated. It was also a place I called home for 4 years. As a child, my family lived on a Canadian military base near Solingen, Germany. The Black Forest was my playground, and it had a profound influence on my development. In many fairy tales and folklore stories, the forest is seen as a source of threat, filled with danger, where horrible things happen to innocent people. Despite being warned by our parents, we were never to go beyond the safe confines of the military base. My siblings and I would jump the fence and take our bikes deep into the woods. There we would discover abandoned lookout towers, bunkers, and trenches, and integrate them into our games. I will never forget the mixture of emotions I felt: uneasiness because of the ruins' history, fear because of the stories we've been told, anxiety because we were disobeying our parents, all because the dark forest was spectacular in its beauty, and sheer joy because we were having fun. Understanding the uncanny as a mixture of fear and delight, I believe my endless play in the Black Forest is one of the reasons I am compelled to engage these complex and often contradictory emotions in my work. I am drawn to the grotesque for the same reason, as it too is an oscillation between the oppositional feelings of attraction and repulsion. So Jack Zipes has written a lot about the Brothers Grimm, and again, this pertains to the forest. Dangerous as it is, the forest is the place where society's conventions no longer hold true. It is the source of natural right, thus the starting place where social wrongs can be righted. So thinking about fairy tales, I originally thought I would just photograph the horses, but that didn't work. So what I ended up doing was using the horses as a jumping off point and started constructing these elaborate sets and photographing them. And at first it was interesting. The horses, it seemed, well, I didn't really know what the hell I was doing at first, to be honest. But after making a couple photographs, I realized that the creatures were caretakers for the horses. So this one is called Red Berry Circus Girl, and it's kind of straightforward. Well, not really, but and you'll notice in a lot of my other photographs and in this one, I often include an animal that is a witness. There's the Red Berry Girl. And there's the witness. This one is, what I wrote here, this is a problem. I did this a while ago. It's called Herd Girl, Gardener and Memory Keeper. So she's the gardener. And when I was making this, I was thinking, okay, is she growing horse legs? And I thought that it was like she was growing these horses. And you know how when you grow a radish, you put the sign radish or cilantro or whatever. And I developed this language. So I was labeling these, but then it also, I realized that this is a little bit like a grave site. So she was both the gardener and the memory keeper of horses that had passed. This one is called Woodsman, Wood Gatherer, and Amputator. And again, and I don't know how to make the slide go backwards, but when I did this, it's like my unconscious was saying, okay, you have to explain why those horse legs have been chopped off. This guy, clearly he's a wood gatherer, but he also has an axe. So what else was he cutting? So that's why then I decided to include amputator, which makes it quite dark. I mean, some of these, I don't censor. When I tap into the dark unconscious, I just accept it and go with it. And maybe we can talk about that later. So there's a detail. This one is called, oh yes, Birdman, Ranch Hands, and Members of the Selection Committee. And again, they're, okay, so this, I'll just back up a bit. The movie 4th of July with Tom Cruise, that scene where so many of these Vietnam vets were legless because they had lost their legs in the war. When I was doing this, I kept on thinking about that, the scene where there's 30 or 40 of them gathered, I think it's someplace in Mexico. But I also worked with a woman who was in a wheelchair. She's a student of mine, and then she's become a dear, dear friend. She's also she's in a wheelchair. And I remember her mom saying, Yvette, she was 15 when she broke her back. Her mom said, Yvette, this doesn't change anything. You can still do whatever you want to do. And she has. She's an amazing artist. She's a mother of 2. I attended her wedding. Michael and I attended her wedding. And instead of the first waltz, she and Alain swam in a swimming pool to music. It was just, I mean, she just has taught me so much. So when I was thinking about the title of this, what is the last thing these guys probably could do? Because the last thing is that they would be able to handle horses, like as ranchers. So that's what I called them. And members of the selection committee, and that's where it gets darker. Are they capturing these horses that will eventually be altered? Here's a detail. And these, if you want to see these individual objects are at Gina's at Slate Gallery. Spot Face Boy, his job, he's the snake handler and chef. This one, I actually lit this on fire. I had a residency at Deep Bay at Riding Mountain National Park in outside of Winnipeg, and we lit this on fire, and thankfully no one complained, but it was quite a mess, but it was also very spectacular. Anyway, the title is Herd Girl, Dysfunctional Fireman. Here's one of the little horses that's actually part of Herd, and it appears in this one, and it's called Horsehead Girl, and then in brackets, Pathologist and Pony Entertainer. This is the altered figure, and the title of this one is Old Man Minotaur, and then in brackets, Unlicensed Gelder. And I did not Photoshop the look of terror on that pony's face. There's the grotesque tongue that's dripping. And I think I have a shot of his crotch. Another altered horse. The title of this one is Equestrian, and then in brackets, Nutritionist. There's detail of the whole idea, and again, this is again sort of grotesque, but the idea that the nutritionist is leaking whatever it is from its body through its anus, through this tube that then feeds the horse in the water. In the mountain, when I did my Group of 7 awkward moments, I often use well-known paintings by the Group of 7, and then I did a series called Canadians and Americans. This was a poster that was left over. So, and this is the altered figure that I used for that. There it is in its situation. And again, this is also at Gina's. And here's the photograph, and it's called, oh yes, Guard on the Edge, sorry, of the Forest and the Night. Here's a detail of the horse, porcupine quills, and the text. And this horse is at Gina's. Two other figures that I made, and here's the photograph, Mother and Daughter. The title, so it's called Storm, and then in brackets, Mother and Daughter. And I wanted there to be this real tenderness between these two species. Clearly one is horse-like and the other one is human-like with ram horns, but there's this intimacy between the two. This is called The Tongue Maker. This is called Winter Dancing Horses with Accordion Playing Inseminator. I decided to do several figurines based on thalidomide. And again, this was the whole idea of, just like the ranch handlers, the last thing people who had thalidomide could possibly, when you think about it, were drummers, because usually one of the limbs was altered. And in discussions with a vet about the whole possibility of when your body is unable to do something, like there are these amazing YouTube videos of people who don't have arms playing the piano with their toes. So again, for me, and I want to stress that these are not humans. They are metaphor for the human body, but these are altered beings, mutant animals. But it was important for me to show the power of belief, I guess. So I made a bunch of these. It's a diptych. This one is called Carl the Blind Conductor. And then on the other side is this photograph, and it's the, I called it the Focomelia drum band, and Focomelia is another word for thalidomide. It's the horse, and this is called Deity. And this is the one I showed you earlier with the fuck Trump stuff on the graffiti. I did this when Gord Downing was dying, or shortly after his death, but I'm pretty sure he hadn't passed away yet. But everyone was just really so aware. So it's called Rain and Birches, and in the brackets, in Fiddler's Green, which is one of his best known songs. So now I'm going to show the village, and I'll be really quick. I ended up thinking I needed to make a construction. This is the exhibition in Montreal. You can see the ramp on one side and the village on the other, and then the photographs. And the village became the site where the herdmen, or the ranch handlers, or the band members, or the caretakers of the horses lived. I ended up thinking about the village back to that earlier photograph I showed of view of Bruegel, the whole idea of a medieval village where often the inner courtyard is where people would perform, and various exchanges throughout the village would go on. So this is the tongue maker. These are just various figures in the village. This one is called the Vagina Dentata Storage Facility. And I ended up getting this. It's a museum wax that is supposedly made to keep things in place, but I bought it when I was in Florida, and I'm sure maybe it's because homes in Florida are air conditioned and they're always really cold, but in room temperature, it drips. And so I ended up putting some of this museum wax into the little hole of this yawning vagina mouth. And then throughout the day, it would slowly drip into a cauldron. And you're lucky, Jennifer, because every other curator has had to take care of the vagina juice installation dripping. And there it is dripping. So every morning, the curators had to get their little jar. I would present them. It'd be like this official ceremony of vagina juice, and they would have to put a little ball on the end of the tongue, and it would slowly drip all day. There's the Minotaur. Okay, so there's a bit of a story behind this one. This is a G.I. Joe, and all G.I. Joes, they don't have penises. They don't come with penises. So I was making a penis for this one, and I made two. And I said to Michael, which one do you think I should use? He said, oh, use that one. So the other one I just threw into my pencil case and forgot about it. So I used this one, did the photograph, and everything's fine. And then a couple of months later, we were babysitting our 7-year-old granddaughter, and she was going through my pencil case, and she pulled out this sculpey penis. And she said, really, Di? And I said, Ariana, it's a penis. She said, oh, I know it's a penis, but really? Oh my God, she's 7. But we laugh about it. Kids, hey, they're great. This construction is at Slate Gallery. It's a figure hanging. Here's Carl the conductor. There's the back of him. And the Focomelia band. I also did a lot of drawings. Some of these are, I call them the drawing condos. So this is just one of them. I think this is the last one. Yeah, the end. There we go.
Thanks, Diana. That was great. It was so interesting, like to hear where you're getting all your inspiration from. And thank you for sharing the other bodies of work that Herd goes with. It would certainly be interesting to seeing them all together in a space. And I was just thinking how, yeah, like the fact that you were referencing a Bruegel painting, you can see that. I mean, you really captured it wonderfully. So do you, and I also like how they switch to, like, you're using some of the figures in the photos and then you repurpose them for the village and that sort of thing as well. Did you realize that you were going to be working in 3 bodies of work, or did that just evolve?
No, certainly not at the beginning. But you know, it's interesting. Artists, when you make the work, it often ends up telling you what you should do next, and that certainly is what happened. And partially because when I started photographing just the horses by themselves, the photographs sucked. Like they just weren't working. And I think, oh God, what am I going to do now? And that's when I thought of putting them on the ramp. Like I thought I was doing them just for the photographs. And then once they were on the ramp and I really enjoyed the sculptural component, it led to the photographs. But in making the photographs, I was spending so much time making the sets. Then I thought, I got to show these sets. And then the sets became part of the village. So some of the sets in the village were in the photographs, but I ended up making a lot of the new buildings that just existed as sculptures, 3-dimensional pieces of art. Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I was thinking when you were talking about the Herd piece, and you were talking about the vulnerability of that work. I think it was maybe Christine Soyak at Nickel, where she had said they're both vulnerable and fierce. And I see them that way as well. Like there's definitely a vulnerability because you are you are addressing disability and difference, but the way that you've altered them, they're mythological in a way as well. So they do have this wonderful fierceness about
some of them certainly more so than others. Like the ones with the tongues that could become weapons, right? Those are, and some of them like with the porcupine quills, and whereas there's quite a few that are on their back. And you know, they're in that submissive, you know, when a dog does that or an animal does that, it's in that vulnerable submissive state. So there's such a range, and because there's close to 80 altered ones, I think people can, when people have looked at the show, often they'll say, which is your favorite? And then I'll say, okay, which one is your favorite? And when they do, and I ask them why, there's usually a story associated with it. Well, this one is my favorite because it reminds me of, and then the situation of when they either felt vulnerable or strong or different or same. So it's, I hope that a lot of people do bring their stories to this work, because that's what makes it function. Right? I mean, art is always the art and the person who sees it and the marriage of that. And when I taught for many years, and students would want to control the meaning of every work of art, and I would say, look, you don't want that. You don't want, you know, like someone with like Yvette looking at my show, Herd, is radically different. She's the woman in the wheelchair. Radically different than someone who was, say, had burns from a fire, looking at, because I used fire in a lot of the work versus someone who has a mental disability, right? And each person's interpretation is different, but they're all right. Everyone is right.
Right, right. So which one is your favorite?
Larry. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And he was 21 when he passed, and he was definitely, I mean, it's a psychological favorite.
I have two favorites because I helped install, and I find that the ones that have the double skulls, those two are my favorites. And the first one with the really long tongue that comes out, it just made me laugh, you know.
Yeah.
And I think I mean, there's so many great ones, but those two are my favorite because they make me smile when I look at them.
That's good. And that for those of you who haven't seen the installation, there's a layer of snow, and that the sparkle of the snow also brings a lightness to the visual installation. Did you find that, Jennifer, when after you added the snow, how it gave it this kind of special space?
Yeah, definitely. And like it just adds to the environment, and it makes it feel fantastical, like that glittery snow.
Yeah.
Like I think to me it just confirmed that this is a fairy tale.
Yeah.
And I hope people see that too when they come and see the piece.
I love that you had what age were the group of kids you showed it to today?
6 years old. Yeah, it was grade 1s.
And that I'm sure they'd love the snow too.
Yeah.
That's the danger of bringing in 6-year-olds to the gallery itself, because when I showed it in Burlington, they had some little kids who just, snow, it kind of made a bit of a mess, but anyway, that's okay. It's just art.
Yeah. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the shift that happened, because Herd sort of is a shift in your work, like your previous bodies of work, the Group of 7 Awkward Moments and the Canadiana Martyrdom series. You used found figurines and toys and place them in dioramas to create narratives that you photograph. And there's this what I really love about that work as well is that there's such a play with scale. It's so playful. You didn't actually, I don't believe you altered the figurines, you just used them to tell the story, is that right?
Well, a couple of them, like there's one with Gray Owl. It's a G.I. Joe that I then had to turn into Gray Owl.
Oh, okay.
So I did, and there's one on Louis Riel. So I did do some alteration. I made a Captain Canuck, but for the most part, the intent of that, especially, well, yes, there's a Group of 7 Awkward Moments, and then the Canadians and Americans, and it was a comment on popular culture, and the figurine had to be within popular culture, so popular it was replicated into a doll, right? So that was kind of the premise of. I did do one on with the Trailer Park Boys, and I had to pay someone because there aren't Trailer Park Boy figurines. There should be, but I had to pay someone who did the Trailer Park Boys. And, it's just excellent. Anyway, but I did, before that, back when I was making my black and white self-portraits in the 1990s, I constructed real physical sets because I was photographing myself in the physical sets. So I did do a lot of alterations back then. So this was, it was not unfamiliar for me to start altering these, but I loved it. And once you do one, then you do a second and then a third, and it just I just couldn't stop. And I should say that I did an animation after I did Black Forest, Dark Waters. I did an animation because someone saw the installation and said, this should be an animation, and like the tongues in that they could move, the swinging tongues. The village is a little bit like back in the day when Eaton's in the Bay had Christmas windows. They were, a lot of the figurines were stationary, but sometimes they had movement, and it just made sense. So the animation is basically me making puppets very similar to the creatures in the village. Mm-hmm. And it's another fairy tale, very dark story.
Right. Just so I mentioned, as we're talking about the Canadiana martyrdom, we have, I believe, the 2 photographs that are in the Prairie Vernacular exhibition comes from that series. So we have other works by Diana that have been shown here at the Moose Jaw Museum and Art Gallery and been touring. And one of them is Martyrdom in Moose Jaw.
Yeah, near Moose Jaw.
Martyrdom. Near Moose Jaw, right, that's right. And it's a scene of RCMP on horseback, and they're drawing quartering Mickey Mouse.
Yes.
Right. So yeah, when I wanted to include that work, I was thinking about your work in terms of Prairie Gothic, because that was a theme that was coming up not only in some folk art that we were looking at, but in contemporary work as well. So I wonder, do you see your work in terms of that? Have you ever thought it like, is a context for your work, Prairie Gothic?
Okay, so the whole idea of the Gothic, how would you describe Gothic art?
Well, it sort of talks about darker narratives, and there is a sort of can be a surreal quality to it as well. Dreamlike, like I think of Emily Atkins, her films as Prairie Gothic as well, and there's a kind of a nice connection to your work, because she is speaking to, like, to me, they're prairie fairy tales, but the fairy tales don't have any sense. Like there's figures in there that you think, oh, this seems familiar, this is like Little Red Riding Hood or something, but the story doesn't go as you would guess it would, and it's unpredictable
and uncanny, right?
Yeah,
familiar and strange at the same time.
Yeah,
I know several years ago I used the word Gothic in my work a lot, but I think and it probably still is, but I'm really now interested in the grotesque and the whole idea of Bakhtin and his description of the pre-Lent carnival, crazy times where everything was inverted and people with disabilities became kings and kings became fools, and it's like turning the world upside down. And again, about the grotesque, the idea of leakage and how orifices, things coming out of orifices and tails. And I mean, that's what my drawing called Carnival of Tails, Tongues, and Other Protrusions. That's really where I'm at these days. And this, I'm doing a second animation that's based on the pre-Lent, kind of like Mardi Gras celebrations, where people are going to expand and bloat. Anyway, it's not in the can, it's still all up here, and I've got 2 years to make this animation.
Great. It doesn't surprise me that you are sort of attracted to the mouth and tongues and that sort of thing in dealing with the grotesque bodies, because when I did my MFA, I was actually researching grotesque and abject in terms of body art as well. And yeah, the mouth is the most grotesque, is what,
And we all have one.
Yeah.
And Diana, like I'm so happy to hear you. Like and like and Jennifer, like also for supporting Diane. Like it's great to hear you all like here. And like Mikhail Buckton, oh my God.
I know.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Writer, yeah.
Like carnivalesque, right?
Yes.
And I've always been impressed by your work through that.
Wow,
And,
that's great. Wow.
yes, of course I have been. And like, I'm just wondering, like, what am I wondering? Like you know, just like, you're so great. You're so great. You are so great. But like, you know what? You like also, I'm going to get into some bad things here. You've been like, you know, like invested in morbid aspects of our
darker stuff,
of course.
Yeah.
And that's hard to deal with. And I want to ask you about that. And
well, I often say, and a lot of people, well, not a lot of people lately, but when I first started giving talks on my work, people would say, why can't you just photograph nice things?
Yeah.
And I've said, okay, if you were to go to Berlin and you go to the Holocaust Museum, you know, you don't want to walk away from that feeling nice. There's a reason that museum is difficult and important. And as an artist, I still am dealing with topics that are difficult and important. And there are plenty of amazing artists that do work that makes you laugh or smile or want to sing. But I'm not one of them. I mean, I was for a while when I did the group of 7 awkward moments. I mean, I think there was a lot of humor in that. And I think there still is humor, but it's pretty dark. And I'm just attracted to that.
But Diane, it's a teenage thing to get into those morbid things. Like, and you can handle that when you're a teenager, and you know, going on. How can you handle that? It's a kind of goth thing, right? A goth.
I don't see that.
No?
No, it's just, do other people see it as a goth thing? I mean, I'd like to hear what other people think. That's an interesting question. I see it as, I don't see myself as different from anyone else.
Miss.
I was just going to say that I think that you, through your art, say things that people think about but are afraid to talk about. And that's what art is good for, right? It's
yes.
to do that.
Yes. Yes. But there are, you know, there's so many artists like myself who do that. I mean, I'm not the only one. There's such a rich field of artists who want to dig up things that are uncomfortable. And thank God nowadays, I think especially with the exposure of the horrors that have gone on, a lot of our Indigenous artists will be making work that will make the rest of us uncomfortable. And that's really crucial. That's really, really important. A lot of us may not want to go there, but we should.
I think too that like in previous series, you have used a lot of dark humor, which is a way, I think, to attract people to engage with a darker narrative too. And with Herd, yeah, you're dealing with some, you know, dark and uncomfortable things there, but there's also like, I see that you approach it with such a sensitivity, you know, and to that vulnerability, and to hear you talk about Larry, you know, and you know, that you are very sensitive to that vulnerability, and I think it reflects in the work.
Thanks. I try to be. when I first showed that work in Brandon, there was a woman in a wheelchair, two people in wheelchairs, and she actually drove in from Winnipeg just to hear the artist talk. And I think she was, I think she was expecting a difficult situation. And I certainly know that for me to do work that touches on disability as an able-bodied person, a lot of people would say that I don't have that right to do that. I would respect someone's opinion who would say that, but I still think that the work is felt and it's honest, and it's not about mocking. I mean, it's about the opposite. It's about, I don't want to say giving a voice, because they have their own voice and they don't need me to speak on their behalf. But it's, in some ways, it's about embracing difference. And I'll be 65 this year, and I can tell you the body is, you know, like as we move towards death, eventually my body will be disabled, and that's also part of the journey. And so it is about the human condition. I think that's at its core, the human condition. Using the metaphor of the horse, which is, you know, when you think about horses, they are so strong. And I showed both sides.
Right. There's a comment here from Crystal Thorburn. Your work is amazing. What was your timeline for all the work in the exhibition that you showed us?
5 years. Yeah. So it's, yeah, a lot of work. Took me about 3 years just to get to do Herd. And then once that took most of the work. And then, yeah, so I would say in total 5 years. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Vincent posted a link to, so we do actually have a virtual exhibition of Herd on our website. So if you can't make it to Moose Jaw to see the show, you can see it virtually. And so you can check it out there. And it'll be up until August the 15th. So hopefully if you're in the area, you'll be able to see. And, you know, it's kind of nice that we are showing at the same time as Diana's exhibition at Slate Gallery in Regina, because you can get it's a double header of Diana Thorneycroft, double feature. And yeah, it was uncanny at how it worked out. Because Diana actually emailed me the very day that I canceled our summer shows because COVID numbers were going up and it was becoming difficult to get the artists to Moose Jaw to install their work. And so when I was kind of sitting perplexed thinking, what am I going to do? And I get this email comes in, you know, yeah, bing, and I'm like, well, there we go.
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. Oh, yeah, and I just really appreciate, and it looks fantastic. Jennifer, the installation looks great. Yeah.
Jennifer, thank you very much for getting this on like our web, and Diana, like, thank you also. And I like, it's wonderful that you've got all this online, and that's great. And I'm happy to see you, Diana. Like, I'm happy to see you, Diana Thorneycroft. I've always wanted to meet you, always. And like, it's a great treat for me to like see you here in this virtual way. And I hope to meet you in person.
Yes.
In the flesh.
And so do you work at the Man Art Gallery?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Okay. Yes, this is Marcus Miller. He's the new director, curator.
Yeah. I showed there.
Yeah.
God, I can't remember, several years ago. It's a great gallery.
And you're part of our family, and we're going to hang on to you.
That's lovely.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, thank you, everybody, for coming this evening.
Oh, thank you so much, Diana. And thanks everyone for participating tonight. We sure appreciate you coming out to support the show.
Good.
Say goodbye, Ariana.
Good. Good. Good.
Thanks, Diana.
Yeah.
Bye.
Goodbye.